Hi, welcome to the Praxis Report, the podcast where theory meets practice and where politics and current events are dissected through a revolutionary lens. We are your hosts, Jonathan Brown and William Barth. Join us in the conversation as we share our analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Whether you're seeking to understand the deeper currents shaping our world or just looking to engage in some radical ideas, the Praxis Report is your guide. How are you doing tonight, Will?
I'm doing great. How you doing, John?
I'm great. So tonight we are going to be discussing the politics of personality. So Will, this episode was your idea. This was one of the things that you really were fired up about discussing. So what can you tell us? What are your thoughts about this question of the relationship between individual personalities and politics?
It just seemed to me that one of the central problems with our politics is that it's based on personality and not on politics. That it's basically when you vote for candidates, you'll often hear the popular refrain, "I vote for the person, not the party."
Right.
In terms of politics and political decision making, that popular wisdom should be just the reverse. I vote for the party. I don't really care much about what person is promoting the party. Uh, Promoting the policy. I just want the policy, the program of the party promoted, whether that policy be national health insurance or Medicare for all or Social Security for all, universal basic income, or peace and an end to these endless wars, or stopping the global warming of our planet. I want a candidate who stands for those policies and those programs. I'm not really too concerned if it's about the personality, whether it's someone I want to have dinner with or have a beer with. Having said that, at the same time, personality and character seems to be something that is built into our election systems. In other words, when you vote for a candidate, or let's take the presidency, when you vote for a president, it does seem that they say character matters. You might remember that refrain from I think it was George Bush who promoted that. Character matters. But there may be something to that, because if a nation say has to rally the masses of the constituency to fight global warming or to defeat Nazism or fascism and go to war, maybe you do need a personality that can unite and unify a nation towards a common purpose. And also, in our system, it seems that these personalities do serve as a sort of role model in terms of ethics, in terms of character, in terms of morality. Although, if you look at the morality of the current crop of candidates over the last several decades, there's not much morality there.
Yeah, well, you raise a very interesting point. This is such a good discussion. One of the things I was thinking of is that it's always been in the history of the communist movement that there's this idea that the party is what's important. I mean, that's something that Lenin really emphasized, and even the communist parties today, like in the People's Republic of China, yes, there are these people that are leaders, but the leader is really a part of a larger committee, and ultimately that committee represents, or is supposed to represent, the masses as a whole. But the Communist Party idea is that you're not voting for, or you're not supporting the Communist Party because you support this individual based on their personality, or you want to have a beer with that person. You're voting in a way because you subscribe to the same common interests that the party is fighting for. But on the other hand, you bring up this good point too, that, there is a certain way that you have to carry yourself. As a serious person, as a serious revolutionary, you have to present yourself in a serious way. You can't just be going off, like firing off the cuff and acting an absurd way that turns the people against you, because you ultimately are trying to be a part of the people and represent the people and lead the people. So there is this relationship, I think, between politics and personality. But
or serve the people.
serve the people. Yeah, absolutely. But it seems like today in America, politics and personality are the opposite, because we use personality. It's almost like America is now this sort of media circus where with television, with reality TV, with movies, with films, with social media and infotainment and influencers and celebrities. So our politicians sort of become the same way that we expect our love for these movie stars and actors and social media people. We put that same psychological feeling onto the people who are running for office, and we have no concern about what they actually stand for, whose interests they're representing, what policies they're promoting. We are focused entirely on their individual personality to the detriment of everything else, it seems.
Right. Since I think this is a phenomena that you talk about, John, with the advent of television, candidates and politics becomes a form of, it becomes commodified. And there was a famous movie from the '60s called "The Candidate," starring Robert Redford, where you see this idealistic young progressive leader become commodified and some sort of a star on television. And then this is a phenomenon that has really taken place with the advent of media and mass media, starting with the '60s with Richard Nixon. You had this candidate, former President Nixon, who was completely scandalized, and he rehabilitated himself through a public relations campaign. They used to call him the new Nixon. Yeah. And he did it through public relations and television, and how he marketed himself like a commodity, and eventually got himself reelected or elected into the presidency.
Well, even before that, don't they talk about the presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, when it was the first televised presidential debate, and most of the viewers thought Kennedy won, and because Kennedy was a young man, he was attractive, he was charismatic, and Nixon was not. And so that personality aspect became a big part of it, right?
Yeah, that was the quintessential moment when television really had its first major impact, was the so-called Kennedy-Nixon debate. By the way, one of the actual problems that took place in that debate for Richard Nixon, who lost the election, was Kennedy on television. He was obviously a very handsome man, but Nixon's makeup was wrong. He didn't have time apparently to fix his makeup. So he, as a result, and another problem, he appeared on television to be shifting, corrupt looking. His makeup was off. He also was sweating under the television lights. So he looked like someone who was lying, someone who was shiftless and not to be trusted. And of course, Kennedy looked like a movie star. Right. He looked rested. His makeup and his hair were perfect. And but Nixon took an important lesson from that loss and his inability to appear correctly on television. Actor, and he repackaged himself. And it was just 8 years later, when they thought his career was completely over, he got elected to the presidency through repackaging himself on television and marketing himself like a commodity in a mediagenic way. And subsequently, if you look at most successful politicians, they are people who are mediagenic from the entertainment industry. Donald Trump is an entertainer. Right. He's a television reality show host. He knows how to work the television. He knows how to play to the camera. He's wonderful at ad-libbing. He may know nothing about public policy, but what does he need to know? I mean, he has his script that he follows, or his issues that he loves to do.
We have
Ronald Reagan is the other example.
Reagan, yeah. Well, and the big presidential candidates we've had in the last 10, 15, 20 years, you have Barack Obama, who was a very charismatic leader.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and most people, a lot of people, in fact, uh, really supported Obama, not because of any of his policies or anything he actually did in office, but because he seemed like the kind of guy that they identified with and they related to. And so, same thing with, Trump is very much all personality. I mean, he's sort of, by virtue of his background in reality TV, he's a very, very charismatic person who can just speak off the cuff. And both people that support him and the left, who is just horrified by him, they call it Trump derangement syndrome,
Right.
where the left doesn't focus on any political issues. They see Trump as this, insane authoritarian figure, so that it makes it so people on the left can't think clearly about what's actually happening. They don't actually look at the politics behind Trump. They only look at Trump's rhetoric, and he speaks in a non-presidential manner, and he's boorish and he's sexist and he says bad things. So that's becomes the focus of what our political discourse is about. Is Trump made this outlandish comment, rather than any of the actual policies that are happening, which no one seems to discuss.
That's exactly right. Most of the attacks on Trump are, or frequently, based on personality. As you say, his boorishness. All Trump. How many times do you hear the refrain? All Trump cares about is Trump. All
Right.
Trump cares about is himself. In other words, making personality the central focus of the campaign, as
Well, not
opposed
to
to the
interject,
issue.
and one thing that I just think of is the issue of war, which you always bring it to. Is one of the things that Trump, actually, to his credit, gestured in favor of negotiating with other countries like the DPRK, or sitting down. I believe Trump was the first president in decades who has actually visited North Korea and tried to
Correct.
negotiate and talk to North Korea. And you see this mass hysteria on the left when Trump tries to bring peace and have diplomacy with Korea. Because in their mind, Trump's personality is, they explain it in a personality based terms. They say Trump's an authoritarian, so he likes other authoritarians, so he wants to talk to these people. Now, to me, that's completely backwards, because what you should be saying is, we need a president who is willing to have pursuit of diplomacy over war. But for the left, their hysteria about Trump is that his personality is bad. So therefore, if he does anything, it's only through the prism of personality, rather than, oh, this is an anti-war action, or we can pursue peace in this way.
Right. If anything, the so-called left. I don't even know if it's a. I don't like using the term left because it's too vague in a sense.
No.
Because if the so-called left attacks Trump for promoting diplomacy, for promoting peace, for promoting denuclearization, or an end to the threat of global thermonuclear war, for the left to attack that, to say that that's wrong, that Trump shouldn't be trying to achieve détente with the so-called enemies, whether it be the People's Republic of China or the Russian Federation. That's not a. I don't think that's a true left. And I would say that if that is the left, in other words, that if it's a pro-war, a pro-neoconservative left, it's no longer a left, and it's lost. It's the Democrats and so-called liberals have completely lost their way. They become warmongers.
Right.
And so the attack is wrong. If anything, the attack should be the reverse. That Trump is merely echoing the language of peace, but he is not a peacemaker.
Right.
He is not promoting true détente and a true new multipolar world. And he
Right.
does not support international law and international treaties to denuclearize the world, the nuclear weapon ban treaty or anything like that. In fact, Trump has pulled out of all of those treaties. So that should be
that's the fallacy. That's the fallacy of focusing on the personality, because I think people that support Trump, more kind of right-wing populist or libertarians will say, oh, well, Trump is a real estate guy. He knows how to make a deal, so he can sit down and negotiate. Like Trump always says, give me 24 hours, I'll end the war in Ukraine. Right.
Correct.
But in reality, when Trump was in office, it didn't matter that he had this personality of this real estate negotiator. The fact is he continued to escalate and perpetuate the same kind of aggressive militaristic policies against Russia, against China, against Iran. I mean, he illegally assassinated Iranian leaders. So all of these things, it's again, we have to look beyond personality if we really want to understand what's going on.
That's right. And again, other than what you described, I think in our last episode together, John, that there sometimes you'll get some breadcrumbs or a veneer of a peace initiative from a Donald Trump. But that's all it is. It's a veneer. You'll often hear the refrain, well, at least Trump didn't start any more endless wars. Well, that's true, but he did try to promote regime change in Venezuela, and he did, and
Iran,
and countless other missile attack in Syria, and pulling out of the peace treaty with Iran, the nuclear peace treaty that had been negotiated that would have helped to bring Iran back into the community of nations. Right. So on the one hand, though, I mean, you can make the argument, and I think that's why you see other personalities like Tulsi Gabbard or RFK saying, "Oh, Trump, he's against these endless wars." And so we're gonna vote for him, but it's not really against neoconservatism. John Bolton headed his whole. It was central to his whole foreign policy. The architect of neoconservatism and endless wars. That's who was running his foreign policy. But he might give you a breadcrumb or two, more than maybe the Democrats would give you. And on that basis, that's why you'll see maybe a personality like a Tulsi Gabbard or a personality like an RFK say, yeah, Trump's better on war. And if you're against war and you're for peace, Trump's your guy. But it's all personality based, and it has little to do with a substantive peace movement initiative or an anti-war movement initiative in a meaningful way.
Right. So not to shift gears entirely, but we have a video clip that we wanted to show. You think it's a good time to show?
And that'd be great, so we can think about it and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. So you want to give us a little background? This is a theorist named H. Rap Brown. This was, I believe, was this in the 60s or 70s when he was giving this lecture?
It would be in the 1960s. H. Rap Brown was a member of the Black Panther Party, which a party that basically came out, sort of subsequent to Martin Luther King's civil rights movement for desegregation. The Black Panthers sort of focused on sort of more substantive issues like self-determination for African American communities, and the movement, which was entitled by people like Stokely Carmichael, who later became Kwame Ture. The movement of Black power, meaning Black self-determination, or what you might call, in a Marxian sense, decolonization, a sort of internal decolonization, which an issue that remains with us today. If you look at the condition of the African American communities around the country, you'll find in almost every social indicator that African Americans are sadly lacking. And these kinds of initiatives, like that were promoted by the Black Panther Party, are important. However, we're using this segment to sort of make this point about the problem with the politics of personality.
Yeah. So let's watch this clip, and we will discuss and analyze it after we play this. So this is from H. Rap Brown, and this is called The Politics of Education.
Of politics in this country is that politics plays upon the individual. And one of the mistakes of the movement has been that we've been a victim of that whole thing of the individual. See, the man always points out an individual and he tells you that's your leader. He says that's your leader. Well, you have to examine what he's doing. When he pushes a guy out there and says that that's your leader, he also understands that he can pull that cat in. He can destroy that cat when he gets ready. So we must begin to relate to concepts, not individuals. So don't ask me, like, what's wrong with Carmichael and the Panthers? Understand what they both are saying. If you understand the ideology that they're pushing, that's sufficient. Then you take a side on that ideology. Don't take a side on the personalities. So you have to understand the difference. You have to understand the difference between concepts and personalities. See, the man, he found out it's very easy to destroy an individual or to discredit an individual, but it's much more difficult to discredit a concept or an idea. So what he does is that he pushes individuals out. He tells you this is your leader. Black people will decide when they need leaders, and they will decide who their leaders are. At this point, our job becomes, those people who understand the nature of the struggle, our job becomes to organize Black people, to organize the revolutionary struggle, not to be projected as leaders. And at this point, the only force in the Black community that will be able to wield the revolutionary ideology will be a political party, a party that pushes that ideology, some type of apparatus that speaks to Black people. Because if you don't have an apparatus, if you don't develop alternatives for people, then the people are shoveled right back into the system. And you say, well, we ain't making no progress. See, the role of the vanguard in any revolutionary struggle is to lead. When it ceases to lead, it ceases to be the vanguard. The vanguard is no more than the guardians of the struggle. And people have to understand, people with certain skills, that's your role. Students, that's your role. You have to occupy the vanguard position in the struggle because you have certain skills.
Okay, so that was a great clip. I really like that. And that's him talking about the vanguard. That's a idea that comes out of Marxism and Leninism, that the vanguard party is the leader that is connected to the masses, but also pushes the masses forward. So you're a part of the people. You're always connected to the people, but you're leading. So he's really rejecting, it sounds like, the entire idea that you should focus on the individual and the personality. You should focus on the party and leading the people, right?
That's exactly right. By the way, John, when I think of the vanguard, and in the sense that H. Rap Brown speaks of it, I think of you because you are a scholar. And
I think of you too, man. I
appreciate it. I'm a little older in age. Not that's a personality thing. It doesn't really matter. But I think of you because you have these skills and you have this knowledge. And so, you because you have these responsibility to try to act as the vanguard, to make these sort of determinations about the nature of the struggle and when is the right time. What is the site of struggle, and what issues do you focus upon? But the point, the more important point that for our discussion today is that Rap Brown really does a very good job of explaining the problem with making personality the focus of politics.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm just thinking,
brilliant. He's exactly right. I think he's exactly right.
Exactly right. And I think of today when Cornel West, who's currently a candidate for the presidency, when he announced his candidacy, it was very, it looked very idealistic, and it looked like Cornel West was going to gain a lot of substantial progressive support. And almost immediately, as soon as Cornel West looked like he was garnering popular support, you started reading stories about his personality. Apparently, he had some kind of income tax problem where he owed money to the Internal Revenue Service. And you see, so here's H. Rap Brown discussing, as soon as they want you to put that leader of the progressive movement out there, because they know once you make the leader the focus, they can destroy that leader. They can scandalize him, or they can hurt him the way they hurt. But you can say Bernie Sanders and pulled him back. So the idea is you want to focus not on the leader, but on the ideology, the program, and the movement. And out of that will come the leadership.
That's perfect. Ideology, program, and leadership. That's very well said. I also think I liked in that clip that he's talking a lot about the focus on the individual. If you're focusing on individual, he's saying you're no longer a movement, you're no longer a party, you're no longer focusing on politics. And I just have to think this problem, I think, is even worse today than it was back then, because today we live in this sort of, very atomized neoliberal existence where, the whole point of neoliberalism, what they always said, it's there's no such thing as society. There's only individuals and your family. So they want everybody to be in your own little bubble where you're on your phone, looking on your own phone, and you're not connected to any sense of community with anyone around you. So that leads to a sort of culture, political culture, where all we care about are the individuals. And look, and if another thing, if politics is dead, they say after the Soviet Union collapsed, all these liberals in the West said that's the end of history. Capitalism is the end of history. There's no alternative to it. So maybe there is no politics anymore. Now there's no such thing as alternative to capitalism. So all we have left is to argue over which personality do you like better.
Right, the sort of the commodification of politics, or the absence of any meaningful politics in politics.
That's commodification is a good term for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. In his personal journey, Brown later evolved and became a devout Muslim. Right. And I wonder, he still maintained. He's a very, very brilliant thinker and scholar in many ways, and revolutionary. But and I think he still maintained his solidarity with the revolutionary ideas that he espoused. But maybe he felt that he couldn't defeat the structure, and and so therefore all he could do was sort of discipline himself as an individual in some kind of religious manifestation, and through that, maybe that's how he could help the movement. Just by simply.
I know it seems to me that there is a revolutionary component to religion in a lot of cases. I mean, in the last 50 years or so, Islam politically has been the force of a lot of revolutionary change in the Middle East. And here in the United States, with, like you point out, the Black Power movement, Islam and Black nationalism have kind of coincided in a lot of ways. So there is perhaps still some hope there.
Right, and we all know, again, when this goes on to another subject, maybe for another podcast, that the role of culture is fundamental to building I think, revolutionary consciousness. So I think
culture is bigger than the individual. So that's also an important thing. So it's not just your personality; you're part of a deeper culture than just yourself.
Correct.
And that's and one thing we should probably just briefly mention too is we talked about Trump, the other candidate in this election, Kamala Harris. She also, has her own personality politics, because just in my own anecdotal experience, whenever I see any people I know that support Kamala Harris, I have never heard anyone tell me any policies that she stands for, or I want to vote for Kamala because she has this position on this issue. It's almost entirely just this very banal vote for her because she's a woman of color or she's a Black woman. There's a very thin identity politics of personality that is almost completely devoid of any actual issues that she may or may not stand for.
Right. If anything, they seem to want to maintain that. By the way, that's been the sort of the media approach to politics since the 60s, which is to kind of depoliticize the candidate so that the voter can project into the candidate anything the voter cares about. In other words, the candidate is sort of devoid of all politics, and through the media and through marketing, the candidate becomes this sort of figure that you sort of project upon. So the candidate really doesn't take any positions on anything, and that's sort of
sort of like what's that sort of like cliche that it's like, you know, which one of these would you like to sit down and have a beer with?
Right, and that's the other cliche that I think that it was prevalent during the George W. Bush's victory. Yes. You liked him more than say a John Kerry. You know, you like to sit down with GW and because you can have a beer with him, and you like this personality while he pursues war crimes of aggression and mass murders 500,000 Iraqis in Iraq and God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people in Afghanistan.
But he seems like a nice guy, so that's.
And you can have dinner with him. Then you can have a beer with him.
Right. Yeah, and you know, but one last thing I think we should kind of bring up too is the role of personality in a sort of revolutionary politics, because you know, revolutionary or reformist, because in America with the New Deal era, we could say FDR, his personality was very charismatic, and he did the fireside chats where he would speak on the radio directly to the people, and he was elected 4 times. So
good point, John. But you know, he was he wasn't the mediagenic. I mean, this is a man stricken with polio.
Right. He was not shown from the waist down, right?
That's right. And yet he had to not only overcome his own, physical infirmaries, but he had to rally a nation to battle Nazism, and it was quite dramatic,
I think it's interesting, and you could also point to, one of the, critiques the anti-communists always bring up is they always accuse communists of having personality cults around Lenin, around Stalin, around Mao.
That's another question you should address, because it's an interesting.
It is interesting, and I think that to some extent it might be a bit similar to the way FDR was to America here, or Lincoln or something, or like the founding fathers, where if you have a leader who is presiding over the country during such a time of revolutionary upheaval, they sort of become a figurehead that the public rallies around and looks to in a positive way. But they also were part of a much larger structure. It was not the case that Mao or Lenin or Stalin or any of these people, or Xi Jinping today, or any of them are just a single individual who is doing everything on their own. They're sort of like steering the country with a committee of everybody involved. But maybe if you have a revolutionary force behind you, a personality can be helpful to do that. But I think the problem is today we have all personality and no actual politics behind it. And that
no politics. Yeah, it's the depoliticization, if that's a word, of politics, and injecting commodification or personality in its place. And again, if you look at, I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is sort of an outstanding example of that, not only because of his personal personality, but the whole thrust of reformist politics within the Democratic Party, our topic last episode, has always been some sort of personality, a figure, a knight on the white shining horse riding in to save the day, whether it had been a John Fitzgerald Kennedy or Barack Obama or Jerry Brown or RFK Jr., that the Democratic Party would always offer a personality who could save the day, who was charismatic and was progressive and could take on the structure, the corrupt structure of both the party, the Democratic Party itself, and the broader problems of the war and the ongoing endless wars. That's I think they embody that problem, whether you're talking about RFK or Tulsi Gabbard or any of these personalities.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think we kind of touched on what we both see as the big problem is that we have, like you said, a depoliticization of of politics from separating and divorcing the personality of the leader from any actual political movement or any actual policies. And I think that probably the reason we have that is this mass media culture, and it's very profitable, and it's probably good for business for the ruling class that are these oligarchs that control the parties, because they ultimately they would rather have the public fighting over the personality of, Trump versus Harris, or Bush versus Kerry. That's better for them than to have the public fighting over real issues, over actual policies. They want us fighting over things that don't ultimately matter. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, you're not going to be friends with Donald Trump. You're not going to be friends with Kamala Harris. You don't know them. You're never going to meet them. You're never going to have a beer with them. You shouldn't care about that at all, honestly. That's not really what should even factor into your calculation.
It's like a trap and listen to what they're saying. What is their ideology? What is their program? And get behind that, and then let the whatever the leader emerges. In A. Trap Brown's words, he was talking about the Black Power movement. He said, the African American community itself will decide at the appropriate time what leadership needs to be produced to fight for this ideology and these programs and this agenda. But that is not as important as the ideology, because it's hard to kill an idea. It's hard to kill a concept. It's not hard to defeat a personality and stand against that.
Well, I think on that note, we should probably wrap it up there for today. I think that's a good.
Okay. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's it for today, and we want to thank all of our wonderful listeners for tuning into the Praxis Report, where we try to connect theory with action. And if you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like this video. We really appreciate us. Leave us a comment, and feel free to subscribe to our channel. We look forward to you joining us next time, of course. And until then, please stay engaged, stay informed, and keep challenging the status quo.